All right, so let's dive into this Trump hush money thing. It's taken another turn, hasn't it? You've got a conviction, but no penalties, calls for disbarment, and a whole lot of questions. It's definitely a unique situation, to say the least, with Trump. Being a convicted felon, about to become president, we've got some interesting Reddit threads and news articles to look at here, so let's get started.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What's grabbing attention here? You're right. It's not every day you see a president-elect facing a criminal conviction,
Right.
but potentially avoiding any real consequences.
Right. So let's break down these charges. We're talking 34 counts of falsifying business records, all tied to those hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels.
Right. That's right.
These charges stem from how those payments were documented
Yeah.
and categorized within Trump's business records. It was essentially an alleged deliberate attempt to conceal their true purpose, and the jury found him guilty on all counts back in May.
And then Trump tried to have that conviction overturned after winning the election. Did that work? It did not. Judge Merchan, who presided over the trial and the subsequent motions, upheld the jury's verdict, and his statement made it clear that election results don't invalidate a jury's decision.
Right. But I'm guessing that's not the end of the story.
Not at all.
Right.
Here's where things get complicated. Judge Merchan also indicated that he's likely not going to impose any penalties on Trump. That means no jail time, no probation, and no fines. He cited a couple of key factors in this decision. One, Trump's status as president-elect. And two, a recent Supreme Court ruling that significantly expands the concept of presidential immunity while in office.
So you're saying he's letting the conviction stand, but hitting pause on any real consequences.
Precisely. Judge Merchan's statement seemed to suggest that. He's aiming for some finality in this particular case, especially given the legal complexities. And Trump's upcoming inauguration. However, he's also leaving the door open for Trump to pursue appeals through higher courts.
And I imagine Trump had something to say about all this.
He certainly did. Trump took to his platform, Truth Social, to express his discontent. And let's just say he didn't mince words. He labeled Judge Merchan corrupt and Trump-hating, even going as far as to call for his disbarment.
Wow. Calling for the judge to be disbarred. That's pretty intense. What else did he say?
Trump's response was filled with inflammatory language. He claimed the entire case was politically motivated, a witch hunt, and that there was no actual crime committed. He asserted his innocence and maintained that the charges were fabricated to silence him, specifically citing a gag order imposed by Judge Merchan.
It sounds like he's gearing up for a major legal battle.
Without a doubt. He also expressed strong confidence in the appellate courts, suggesting that he fully intends to appeal the verdict.
So we've got this unusual legal limbo.
Right.
A convicted felon, soon to be president, claiming innocence, firing back at the judge, all while potentially avoiding any tangible punishment. This is definitely raising eyebrows. And speaking of reactions, the public certainly has thoughts, especially on those Reddit threads you mentioned.
Yeah, the online reaction, particularly on Reddit, has been quite fascinating. It provides a snapshot of how the public is processing this news.
What do people say?
You see a real diversity of opinions, reflecting the broader societal divide. Surrounding Trump and his legal battles, some users are firmly standing by the judge's decision, emphasizing that no one is above the law, not even the president-elect. They see the conviction, even without immediate penalties, as a crucial step toward accountability.
And what about those who disagree with the judge's approach?
There's definitely a vocal contingent expressing deep frustration and disappointment with the lack of penalties. They argue that this undermines the entire concept of justice and sends a dangerous message that wealth and power can shield individuals from consequences. Some even call it a three-tiered justice system, where the rules seem to bend for the elite.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the message this sends and what it could mean for the future, especially with Trump taking office.
That's precisely where this conversation gets even more interesting. The public's reaction, the legal precedents, the political implications, they all converge here, creating a scenario with far-reaching consequences.
It feels like we're in uncharted territory here. What does this mean for presidential immunity? Does this case set a new precedent?
That's the million-dollar question, honestly. The legal waters are murky. The Supreme Court recently issued a ruling that really expanded the scope of presidential immunity, which Judge Merchan clearly took into consideration. However, this particular case pushes the boundaries. It's unprecedented to have a convicted felon assume the presidency. So we're navigating uncharted legal territory.
So we've got this landmark Supreme Court ruling, and then this highly unusual situation with Trump. It definitely complicates things.
Absolutely. This case could potentially embolden future presidents to act with even greater impunity, knowing that the legal protections afforded to them are substantial It's a development that warrants close scrutiny and careful consideration of its long-term impact.
What about the practicalities? Trump has vowed to appeal, but how likely is he to succeed? And what about those rumors of potential pardons? Could he actually pardon himself? Or would that require the governor?
It's important to remember that the appeals process can drag on for months, even years. While Trump might be projecting confidence, legal experts are divided on his chances of success. Remember, the composition of the Supreme Court has shifted since that immunity ruling, so it's difficult to predict how they might rule on this specific case.
So there's a lot of uncertainty there. And what about those pardon rumors?
That's another legal quagmire. The concept of a self-pardon is unprecedented in American history and would undoubtedly face fierce legal challenges, potentially even triggering a constitutional crisis. It's a highly controversial notion with no clear legal precedent.
Sounds like a legal minefield. What about a pardon from the governor?
A governor's pardon is certainly more plausible, but would carry significant political risks, especially in a state like New York, where the political climate is decidedly less favorable to Trump. It's a decision with major ramifications, and any governor would weigh those carefully.
Okay, so there are a lot of what-ifs in play. But regardless of how those legal aspects unfold, one thing's for sure, this entire situation is a historic moment for America. We're in truly uncharted waters.
There's no doubt about that. This case is a stress test for our institutions, for our legal system, and for our democracy as a whole. It compels us to grapple with fundamental questions about justice, accountability, and the limits of executive power.
And it's not just about the legal battles, is it? It's about the public's trust in our institutions and how this entire ordeal might erode that trust.
Precisely. The ramifications of this case extend far beyond the courtroom. It raises profound questions about the health of our democracy and the principles upon which it is founded. The way this unfolds will have lasting repercussions for years to come, shaping public perception and potentially influencing future legal interpretations of presidential power.
You mentioned the public's reaction earlier, and I'm really curious to dive into those Reddit threads you mentioned. What are people saying beyond just the support or frustration with the judge's decision?
The online discussions offer a fascinating window into how people are processing this news. You see a full spectrum of emotions on display: anger, confusion, disbelief, even dark humor. It's clear that this case has struck a nerve and tapped into some deep-seated anxieties.
What kind of anxieties are we talking about?
Well, for some, there's this unsettling feeling that the system is rigged in favor of the powerful, that wealth and status can shield individuals from real accountability. This case, with its lack of immediate penalties for a convicted felon, fuels that perception.
That makes sense. Did you find any specific comments that captured that sentiment?
One comment that really resonated with me compared Trump to a Teflon Don, someone who can seemingly evade any consequence, no matter how serious the accusations. It's this idea that nothing sticks to him, that he operates outside the rules that apply to everyone else.
That's a powerful analogy. It really encapsulates that sense of frustration and helplessness that many people feel when they see figures like Trump, seemingly flouting the norms and escaping unscathed.
It's important to note, though, that not everyone shares that view. There's also a contingent of Trump supporters who firmly believe that he's being unjustly targeted, that this whole hush money case is nothing more than a politically motivated witch hunt designed to tarnish his reputation.
That's a perspective we can't ignore, even if we don't necessarily agree with it.
Absolutely. Acknowledging those contrasting viewpoints is crucial because it highlights the deep polarization within society. You have people looking at the same set of facts and reaching vastly different conclusions. It speaks to the challenges of having a shared understanding of justice, fairness, and accountability in such a divided climate.
It's like we're living in parallel universes, where each side interprets events through their own lens, further reinforcing existing beliefs.
Precisely. And that's why critical thinking is more important than ever. It's about engaging with information thoughtfully, considering different perspectives, and forming our own informed opinions, rather than blindly accepting one narrative or another.
It's about questioning assumptions, digging deeper, and not allowing ourselves to be swept away by the tides of partisan rhetoric.
Exactly, and that's particularly relevant in this case, where the legal complexities are intertwined with political narratives and personal biases.
You know, one thing that struck me while reading those Reddit threads was the role of humor, specifically dark humor and satire. As a coping mechanism, there were some pretty hilarious comments, even in the face of a situation that's quite serious and potentially unsettling.
That's a fascinating observation. You're right. There's a long tradition of using satire and humor to grapple with challenging social and political realities.
It's like finding a way to laugh in the face of absurdity,
Right.
to acknowledge the absurdity of the situation while refusing to be completely overwhelmed by it.
There's a certain defiance in that kind of humor, a refusal to let the weight of the situation crush our spirits. It's
Yeah.
a way of saying, yes, this is messed up, but we're going to find a way to process it, to cope with it, even to challenge it through laughter.
And it's not just about making light of a serious situation, is it? Satire can also be a powerful tool for social commentary, for holding those in power accountable.
Absolutely. Think about political cartoons, late-night comedy shows, even memes. They all use humor to expose hypocrisy, to highlight injustice, and to make us think critically about the world around us.
It's like they can cut through the noise and get straight to the heart of a matter, making us laugh, while also making us think. It's a potent combination. But in this case, with a figure like Trump, who often seems immune to traditional forms of criticism, does satire even have any bite?
That's a great question, and it's something worth pondering. Does satire lose its effectiveness when confronted with a figure who seems to revel in the attention, even negative attention? Or does it simply adapt, finding new and creative ways to lampoon and challenge those in power?
It makes you wonder if the rules of engagement have changed in our current political landscape.
Perhaps they have. Maybe satire needs to evolve, to find new ways to penetrate those seemingly impenetrable walls of ego and self-promotion.
Or maybe it simply amplifies the absurdity, shining a light on the inconsistencies and contradictions in a way that traditional critique can't quite capture.
That's certainly a possibility. By highlighting the absurdity, satire can potentially create a sense of cognitive dissonance, forcing people to confront the incongruity between their beliefs and the reality being presented.
It's almost like holding up a funhouse mirror to those in power, distorting their image just enough to reveal the flaws and foibles that might otherwise go unnoticed.
I like that analogy. It captures the essence of what effective satire can do. It's not about outright demonization or personal attacks. It's about using wit and exaggeration to expose the truth, however uncomfortable it might be.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from the legal intricacies of the case to the broader societal implications, and even the role of humor in processing it all. It's clear that this hush money case is more than just a legal matter. It's a reflection of our political climate, our social divisions, and the challenges facing American democracy.
And that's precisely why it's so important, to understand the nuances, the arguments, and the potential consequences. This deep dive is about providing you with that understanding, equipping you to form your own informed opinions, and engage in these crucial conversations.
So after diving deep into this, what does it all mean for our listener? Why should they care about this beyond the headlines?
I think this case is a real wake-up call. It reminds us that the rule of law is constantly being tested, and that we all have a role to play in staying informed and engaged. We can't just shrug this off as another Trump scandal. This situation strikes at the heart of our democracy, the integrity of our institutions, and the very values we hold dear.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget that justice isn't a spectator sport. We need to be active participants, thinking critically, and holding those in power accountable.
You're absolutely right. Our democracy is fragile. It needs constant safeguarding by citizens who are informed, engaged, and willing to stand up for what's right.
And that's exactly why this deep dive is so important.
Right.
It's not just about understanding the legal ins and outs of a single case. It's about grasping the bigger picture, the underlying principles, and how this all could impact us.
Exactly. We've given you the tools to navigate this complex landscape, to understand the legal arguments, the public's reactions, the historical context, and the potential consequences. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand, the better equipped we are to participate in shaping the future we want.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this thought. Don't let this be the end of your exploration. Keep researching, keep asking questions, keep engaging. This case is just one chapter in a much larger story, and it's a story that we're all writing together.
Stay curious, stay informed,
Uh-huh.
and stay engaged. That's the best way to honor those core principles of justice,
Yeah.
accountability, and democracy that we hold dear.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit entertaining. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those critical thinking gears turning.